Hey Optimancers, Chris here. So in today's video I want to talk about monks, and what I want to mention is that, just to start off with, monks suck. Mainly they suck mechanically, though frankly I think they probably suck a little bit conceptually as well, but today I want to mostly focus on the mechanics and why monks just aren't good at anything. But before we get into that, I want to mention I have a Patreon page, and if you are interested in checking it out, I put a link in the video description, and I want to call out a couple of my Archmage level subscribers today. Alistair, James Sprague, and Airhead, thank you so much for your support, and thank you to all my patrons. So why this video? Normally with my videos I try to stay positive, but I keep having the same conversations in the comment sections of my videos talking about monks. And I need to have somewhere I can just link people, where I can show them everything broken down as to why I have the opinion about monks I have. And I realize that some people are going to really dislike this video because they're not going to be a fan of the negative subject, or they personally enjoy the monk and they don't like that I'm attacking it. Keep in mind, monks are fictional. Okay, this is just a mechanic from a game that I think is poorly designed. I'm not attacking you. I'm not attacking anyone who plays monks. And if you enjoy playing monks, continue playing them. If you play in a campaign with me, I will give you no stress about playing a monk. But now let's get into why monks suck. Now briefly I want to talk about the history of the monk class. Now it would be understandable for you to think that monks were based on Shaolin monks, because the monk class is called monks, and that there's folklore about the Shaolin monks and their legendary kung fu abilities. And this would have been kind of an interesting concept for monks. A lot of people don't realize that's not where monks come from. Monks were actually created by Brian Bloom, an early player of Dave Arneson's Blackmore supplement for Dungeons & Dragons, and he really liked the Destroyer novels. And in the Destroyer novels there is a U.S. agent named Remo Williams who would do kung fu moves trained by his Chinese master and beat up mostly Asian people. In the mid-80s, Remo Williams got his own movie called Remo Williams: The Adventure Begins, and in that movie I seem to remember that he could run across water and incapacitate people by poking them, which we actually see in the monk concept even today. Another thing I remember about this movie, it was not good. Then with the release of Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, we saw the monk as a base class for the first time. And the monk in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons was terrible. It got a D4 hit points. It did really poor damage. Its armor class was awful. It didn't have spells. At higher levels, it would still suffer, although it got some special abilities, simply because it was taking too many hits, didn't have enough hit points. In Dungeon Magazine, they eventually revised the monk class, gave it more hit points, gave it better armor class, gave it more damage, gave it more levels, gave it more abilities, and then it was okay. But as it was written in the player's handbook, the monk was probably the worst class in D&D, and that is a theme that we would continue with after that. Now when 2nd edition came around, they got wise and they just got rid of the monk. The monk was gone in 2nd edition, but it did return in a later supplement. This was probably in the declining age of Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition, and the point where TSR was just printing books just to try to stay alive. And they did bring back the monk after that, but it was not popular even then. Then came 3rd edition, and once again the monk was restored to being one of the base classes in the game. And it wasn't the worst class in 3rd edition, because the bard was just so bad in 3rd edition that it was even worse than the monk. But the monk wasn't doing well. But one thing they did do for the monk in 3rd edition is they decided that they were going to give the monk more attacks than any other class in the game. So at least the monk had something interesting about them, something unique that made them, in at least one way, better than the other classes in the game. Then with the revision of 3rd edition came 3.5, And there became a lot more options for optimizing characters, and the monk actually had some options. The main one we saw was referred to as the trip monkey. And the reason that it was called trip monkey is because they determined that since the monk got so many attacks in a round, and if they did them as trips, they could trip a lot of things. And tripping was reasonably good in 3.5, and so the monk kind of became the tripping class. And I occasionally get asked by people, do you remember when the monk was good in 3.5? Well, actually not really. I do remember that the monk was passable in 3.5 when you made a tripping build, though I thought the tripping build was kind of boring, but at least it was good at something. Then came 4th edition, and once again the monk was no longer a base class in the player's handbook, and again was added in a later supplement, so no longer was it considered a base class of Dungeons & Dragons. Then came 5th edition, and once again we had the monk, but they decided to change a couple things. They decided that no longer would the monk have more attacks than any other class in the game. In fact, the monk has less attacks than the fighter does. But what they decided they would do with the monk is they would give it martial arts, which would give it an additional attack each turn using a bonus action. They decided they would give it stunning strike, an ability at 5th level where it could stun an enemy. And they decided they would give it a great movement speed. And between those three things, the idea was that the monk would be kind of a combination of an offensive powerhouse with the ability to control the enemy, all while moving around the battlefield with ease. So what is it that makes the monk suck? Why is it that that design idea doesn't work? Well, I'm going to talk about that right now. So the first thing is there are a lot of defenders of the monk. In fact, there are people who say that the monk is one of the best classes in the game. I've seen articles written by DMs in how frustrating it is to deal with the power of monks in the game, that they are overpowered, and I do not get it. And when I've had conversations with people, they usually tell me a few things about how a monk should be built. The first thing they'll say is that a monk should start with a dexterity score of 16, a wisdom score of 16, and a constitution score of 14. Of course, this requires that you start with a race that's going to get a bonus to wisdom and dexterity, but this isn't hard. Humans can do it, Aarakocra can do it, Wood Elves can do it, Kenku can do it, Half Elves can do it, Ghostwise Halflings can do it, so you still have a number of options in order to fit those stat requirements. And the reason why they want those stats is because it's going to give you the best possible starting armor class, the best possible starting to hit, and the best possible starting DC for your special abilities like Stunning Strike. Well, we maintain at least a decent constitution modifier that's going to give us decent saving throws and decent hit points. And whenever I ask what a monk is supposed to do, I get told different things by different people. So it's tough to keep the goalposts steady, but I can narrow it down to a few things. The first is I'm told that the monk can be effective at delivering damage. I've been told this is especially true at lower levels, where martial arts and flurry of blows can really deliver, holding past level 5 because of extra attack, and maybe faltering at the very high levels. And whenever I point out that that's not the case, then the goalposts switch. And then I'm told the second thing, that the monk is actually an effective tank. I'm mistaken in thinking I should be focusing on offense when I should be focusing on defense, because the monk can draw enemy attacks and seldom get hit due to their unarmored defense and their ability to use dodge using a bonus action combined with their amazing saving throws. And when I point out how that doesn't work, then I'm told the third thing, that the monk's strength is actually their maneuverability, able to pop into and out of melee, delivering damage and stunning strikes, then slipping out again with unmatched speed, and thus able to avoid enemy attacks. And then fourthly, finally, and most commonly, I'm told the monk's strength is their ability to control the battlefield, as they can stun multiple creatures on their turn, avoiding magic resistance, and delivering one of the most effective status conditions in the game. And I gotta tell you, whenever I point out that a monk isn't good at any one of these things, another pops up. The monk isn't an effective controller? Yeah, but the monk is really good at tanking, and that's what they should be doing. The monk isn't good at tanking? Yeah, well, it's maneuverability. They shouldn't be taking those attacks in the first place. Their maneuverability is overrated? Yeah, but it's good enough to help them deliver good damage. Their damage isn't good. Yeah, but remember, it's not really about the damage. It's about their ability to control the battlefield. Enough. Here's the thing. The monk isn't good at any of those things. Not to say they're terrible at all of them. But even with the expenditure of their precious resources, which, by the way, all draw from the same source, unlike the bard with their inspire, or a cleric with their channel divinity, or a paladin with their channel divinity, or their spells, or a wizard with their subclass abilities, or a sorcerer with their sorcery points. So many classes in the game draw the resources from different sources. The monks draw them all from the same very limited source, and even when they use it, they don't measure up in any of those areas. Now, to be clear, if you think you are spending resources to fill a role in your group, then you should be one of the better ones in the group at filling that role. At least you should be better than someone not spending resources at all. Let's go through what the monk is supposed to do one at a time. So the first one, the most ridiculous one really, is that the monk is good at defense and tanking. So let's start with that one. So when we're talking about defense and tanking, we're talking about a few things. We're talking about hit points, we're talking about armor class, we're talking about saving throws. And with the hit points of all the classes in the game expected to fight in melee, monks are tied for the worst. Also, with a monk needing both wisdom and dexterity to boost their armor class, we can be sure they aren't backing this up with a constitution score that's impressive. In most cases, assuming a dexterity and wisdom are 16, we're probably stuck with a 14 at best, which is fine. 14 constitution isn't terrible, but it's not higher than we would expect any other melee character to share, and a lot of other melee characters are going to have more. Now, with the armor class, monks have unarmored defense, and what an armored defense does is it is going to basically, if you don't wear armor, then you get to add your wisdom bonus to your armor class. So you're going to have 10 plus your dexterity modifier as normal, plus your wisdom modifier. Now let's look at what other classes get. So if we have a fighter and they're focusing on defense, at first level, they're going to have chainmail, shield, and defensive combat style. We can expect a starting armor class of up to 19. Without expending any resources or getting any magical equipment, this will eventually peak at 21. A paladin fares a bit worse, as they can't get defensive combat style until level 2, meaning they will start with an armor class of 18 at best. Like the fighter, they will peak at 21 without using resources or getting magic items. A ranger is the same as a paladin, assuming they start with a 14 dexterity at least. The ranger caps out at a lower armor class 20 though, assuming no magic items or resources. Now a barbarian, like a monk, has an ability called unarmored defense, but theirs is a little bit different, because first off, they will be using their constitution score instead of their wisdom score, which means that we are actually getting a synergy between defense for armor class as well as with hit points. The second thing is, the barbarian using their unarmored defense can still use a shield. So because they can still use a shield, they can start with an armor class of 18 if they focus on their unarmored defense and a shield. And they can technically cap at 24 due to the scaling of unarmored defense, and they have a good capstone, and a capstone that is going to improve their armor class even more. Now, most barbarians don't choose this route, choosing to tank through hit points and resistance instead, though I would point out an Ancestral Guardian Barbarian that combines good armor class with the hit points and the resistance is one of the best tanks in the game. Now the Rogue is not good defensively, and is likely starting off with a paltry 14 armor class. We can expect this to improve to 17 without magic items or resources, which still isn't very good, and the Rogue will avoid tanking for these reasons. They can build this up to some degree by mitigation of damage through Uncanny Dodge at level 5. A rogue willing to spend resources can do a fair bit better by going Arcane Trickster and taking defensive spells like Shield or Mirror Image. Now let's go to the Monk. The Monk is going to start with an armor class of 16 at best. This is really the best you can hope for if you're not rolling for your ability scores. This is the second worst of any martial that worries about armor class. It's going to cap at 20, and not until really late in the game. I mean, like level 16. Way later than other martials can meet or exceed this number. Now a monk can improve this by dodging using their ki, which not only uses a resource, but also prevents them from using many other abilities that require bonus action, including their martial arts or flurry of blows. However, being able to expend a resource to improve AC is not unique to the monk. Fighters have some options here, paladins have some options here, the rogue has some options here as previously mentioned, so being able to do better than just your base armor class, this is not something the monk gets that nobody else gets. In the end, when it comes to avoiding hits, a defensively focused monk is not the best, or the second best, or arguably even the third best, and they need to spend all their resources to hold even the middle spot. This is the spot where they would be if everybody else is not spending resources at all. If other classes are spending resources, monks are amongst the worst. And if a monk isn't using ki to dodge, then they likely are the worst, or maybe the second worst, as the rogue is pretty poor here too. Now they can deflect missiles at level 3. This is not really deflection, but a damage reducer. They need to use their reaction to activate, and only against a ranged attack, and only against one ranged attack. So, if you are facing a bunch of archers, this isn't going to be a big help. If a hill giant throws a rock at you, you may deflect about half the damage. But if you are facing one archer firing one arrow around, yep, it's really good in that case. But what about saving throws? Because saving throws are part of tanking. So there is a myth that monks are really good at saving throws, and it is a myth. A first level monk does not have a significant advantage on saving throws versus other martials. Their dex save will be as good as anybody's, probably matching the rogue. Their con save will be as weak as anybody's. Their wisdom save will be in the middle. God forbid wisdom, dexterity, and constitution isn't targeted, then the monk's not good at all. At 7th level, their dex save gets more effective through evasion, so the monk remains really good at dex saves. The rogue's getting the same ability at the same level, so they're maintaining their spot as the best for dexterity saves only. Other saves remain mediocre or poor. Now, at 14th level, the monk will get a boost to all their non-proficient saving throws. However, 14th level, I think it's pretty disingenuous to say the monk is great at saving throws when the ability you're referring to doesn't even come into play in most campaigns, or just the end of many others. Still, if this was unique, or the monk was truly the best at this point, I think it would be noteworthy. But it's not. Paladins boost every saving throw, proficient or not, at level 6, and they improve the saves of everyone around them as well. Gloomstalker Rangers bypass monks on wisdom saves at level 7. War mages can use their reaction to get a +4 to any saving throw they make, proficient or not. And this is at level 2. Fighters, of course, are looking for feats to take by level 12 at the latest, and Resilient Wisdom is often a good bet for them. In addition, they're going to get the ability to re-roll failed saving throws. So by the time monks get this ability, they've already spent 13 levels being somewhere in the middle saving throw wise, and this ability is not something better than anyone else gets. So it becomes not so much noteworthy as more of a footnote. So when it comes to tanking, monks just aren't good. They don't have good hit points, they don't have a good armor class, and they don't have good saving throws. So you put those together, and this is not a good defensive class. So what about the next claim? It's not about the defense, it's about the offense. They're good at damage, especially at lower levels, and it doesn't fall off until very high level. Well, let's talk about the math here, because that is simply false. Of all the classes in the game that use weapons primarily, the monk is the worst at delivering damage. In fact, any class can be made to do more damage than a monk that specializes in doing damage. And that is a very sad fact. If the monk doesn't specialize in doing damage, then they're left in the dust, a barely significant addition to a party's offensive capability. Will it feel bad when you deliver 15 points of damage and the other party members deliver 50? Maybe not for you. But don't tell me monks are good at delivering damage, or even that the damage represents a symphony of abilities that come together for a greater whole. Now, the first thing I tend to be informed of is that martial arts is special. It allows a first-level monk to attack twice in a round, and who else can do that? So what martial arts does is you can make an unarmed strike as a bonus action when you take the attack action. And what this is going to do for you is it means that you can hold a weapon in two hands and attack with it once, and then you can make your martial arts attack with your bonus action. So we're probably going to be looking at a quarterstaff or a spear, which is going to give us a D8 when we use the versatile property. So our main attack will be a D8 plus 3, or 7.5 points of damage. Then a second attack, which will be our martial arts attack for a D4 plus 3, or about 5.5 points of damage. And once we work out the math, if we assume about a 60% chance to hit, we're looking at 8.15 points of damage per round. Now that is actually a decent number at level 1. But this is as good as it gets for monks when comparing damage to other classes. It is all downhill from here. And is it really all that unique and special? Can no one else really do this? A level 1 fighter with 2 short swords, guess what it's delivering? 8.15 points of damage per round. Exactly the same. And this is using 2-weapon fighting. And here's a well-known fact. Although 2-weapon fighting does deliver decent damage at low levels, it scales really poorly, and eventually you're using all your bonus actions up every round to deliver less damage than other fighting styles that don't use your bonus action. But here's another fact that I find it's strange that it's not well known. Martial arts is 2-weapon fighting. Martial arts isn't unique. It's just the only class in the game that describes the poorly disguised version of 2-weapon fighting in the class description. Every class in the game can make an attack with a bonus action using 2-weapon fighting. It's just that a limited number of classes make it worthwhile at any level. And for all of them, it's probably not worth it, except the monks, who are the only class that don't get to choose. And by the way, if a level 1 rogue attacks with 2 short swords, they can expect to do over 9.5 points of damage around at first level, so the monks aren't even the best at that. So if my claim is that that's as good as it gets, what about extra attack? What about flurry of blows? Once we start to increase our martial arts dice, don't those 3 things add together to create at least a reasonable offensive capability? Well, here we have to talk about builds a bit, because although people who defend the monk will tell me that starting with a dexterity of 16 and a wisdom of 16 is standard, what happens at level 4 and 8 is not standard. When I claim that monks aren't good at delivering damage, I'm told that monks should be increasing their dexterity at level 4 and 8. But if I'm told that monks aren't good at control, then I'm told, why are you increasing your dexterity? You should be increasing your wisdom at levels 4 and 8. And that doesn't even take into account the number of people who tell me that monks should be taking mobility at level 4 to increase their maneuverability. So in order to show you how bad the monk is, what I really need to do is just show you everything. So I talk about baseline damage a lot, and when I do builds, I often do baseline damage, and then I do a comparison to baseline damage. Any class can easily beat the baseline, all 20 levels, except for the monk. The monk is the only one that can't do it, and not only can't they do it, they're way, way short. So if we focus on dexterity, this is the monk versus the baseline. The red line is the monk. And as you can see, from levels 1 through about level 10, the monk and the baseline are pretty close, but the monk can't even stay above the baseline at that point. And then at level 11, things go way wrong. And that's because other classes are getting additional attacks, or an additional cantrip attack, or they're getting additional damage on every attack, like we see with the paladin. But the monk isn't really getting anything. Their martial arts die is increasing, but it increases so slowly that even when we get to level 20, it doesn't do as much as some non-magical weapons. So what we see here is a class that struggles to maintain the baseline, and then eventually just completely falls off. And this is focusing on our combat ability. Now what about flurry of blows? Because we can spend a key point and we can use flurry of blows. That's going to give us an additional martial arts attack with our bonus action. So if we do that, surely then, at least, we can destroy the baseline. Well, the first thing I'll point out is that you're not using Flurry of Blows all the time. At second level, you can use it twice, and that's only if you don't use your key for anything else, because once again, key is a single resource that funnels for everything for the monk. So if you choose to use it on Flurry of Blows, then that's all you get to do. And basically, you'll be able to do it for one attack for each level of monk you have. So it's not being used all the time, even if you use all your key on it. But what if you could use it all the time? Then, surely, the monk would be looking better. So this is the monk that is focused on dexterity, that is using Flurry of Blows every round. Now what we can see is, if this was the case, a monk could actually maintain a spot comfortably above the baseline till about level 11. Then at level 11, they do less damage than the baseline, even when they're using Flurry of Blows. And again, it only gets worse at 17th level. So if we do everything we can as a full class monk to focus on our offense, we're going to increase our attack stat, we're going to use all our resources on improving our damage per round, we can kind of maintain above the baseline, but not a lot. I mean, not as much as you can do with a Beastmaster Ranger, for example, and I'll post a link in the video description down below showing how a Beastmaster Ranger can beat these numbers. But in addition to that, they can't maintain above the baseline. And this, again, assumes a fictional world where you could use Flurry of Blows every round. So even when you use Flurry of Blows as a monk, you're not doing the damage you should be as a frontliner. But these graphs don't represent what I hear from a lot of people, because from what I hear from a lot of people, I shouldn't be raising my dexterity because I want my stunning strike to work. And if I want my stunning strike to work, I should be increasing my wisdom. So what happens to our damage if we increase our wisdom instead at levels 4 and 8, and we don't increase our dexterity until levels 12 and 16? Well, then this happens. This is what happens. The red line is the monk. And what you can see is by level 4, we're below the baseline, and it only gets worse after that. That is abysmal. Classes can beat the baseline really easily. I do not set a hard baseline. My baseline is just considering a Warlock who increases their charisma, they take Agonizing Blast, and they throw on a Hex spell. And that's it. That's all I'm doing. This is an easy mark. I don't ever expect any build I make to fall below the baseline, and frankly, when it's close to the baseline, I consider that to be not very good. Below the baseline, especially like this is just unheard of in this game, that you could make a character that looks like this. I can make any class in the game over that baseline, and this is where the monk looks. So it's not like the monk is a little bit below. It is way, way below. But what if this wisdom monk then uses their Flurry of Blows to try to make up that difference? This is what it looks like. Even when they use their Flurry of Blows, they can't even maintain the baseline. A level 5 monk that didn't increase their dexterity at level 4 cannot even meet the baseline for damage at level 5 even when they use their Flurry of Blows. That is absolutely pathetic. But of course, it's not about the damage. They can do just terrible, terrible damage. And it's not about the defense. It doesn't matter that their defense is one of the worst of any of the martials in the game. It's about stunning strike. So let's talk about stunning strike. The first thing is, if you want to use stunning strike, it's going to use up a key point. There is only one resource pool that monks get, so every ability they have that has limited use always draws from that same pool. So if you take a subclass and you want to use some of the abilities of your subclass, you're going to be using key. So if you want to do stunning strike often, it means you're not doing anything else. Now, a stunning strike requires two things. The first, you need to hit, and second, the opponent must fail a Constitution saving throw. Now, again, if you're increasing your dexterity, you're not increasing your DC. Your DC at level 5 will be 14 or 15. Now, the average Constitution save for a CR5 creature in the Monster Manual is +4. Of course, if you're facing a CR5 creature with a 5th level party, that's not a challenge. It's only a challenge if there's many creatures, and in that case, stunning one creature isn't such a big deal anymore. If you want to have one creature be a challenge for a 5th level party, then you're probably talking about something like challenge rating 9. And if we're talking about challenge rating 9 creatures, then we're talking about a +9 average saving throw for creatures in the monster manual. So the chance of that CR5 creature making their save is about 50% or 55%, depending on whether you increased your wisdom at level 4. So that creature that's not really a challenge is going to save approximately half or a little bit more than half the time when you use your stunning strike. And a CR9 creature making a save, 75 or 80%. In other words, why did you bother wasting your key and throwing it in the garbage? But then I'm told, no. You're not thinking about this right because I've got Flurry of Blows. So I'm going to hit 4 times and then I can make 4 stunning attempts. But let's consider we use Flurry of Blows. You're probably going to hit 2 times. Your chance of stunning a single CR5 creature, about 80% with 3 key cost. Your chance of stunning a single CR9 creature, 44% with 3 key. So we are spending a massive amount of our resources and it will probably fail. Now, to those who point out that this bypasses magic resistance, I won't argue that, but I think you're overlooking 2 things. The first is magic can target any saving throw. So the average intelligence save of a CR9 creature is +1. If we assume the same DC, that's a CR9 creature making its save against, say, Phantasmal Force 45% of the time. With magic resistance, that becomes 70% of the time. That's less chance to save than it would have against a stunning strike that bypasses that resistance, though that doesn't take into account the more obvious difference. And this is the big thing that gets overlooked. Spells can often target multiple enemies, vastly increasing the chance of at least one creature failing that save. Or even more obvious, a lot of spells don't offer a saving throw at all. If 8 giant frogs attack a creature, that's 8 chances for it to be grappled and restrained, with no magic resistance involved, and you get to deliver some damage too. Or Wall of Force around someone, no save. There are countless more examples. This is true of every primary spellcaster in the game, of which there are 6, of a total of 12 classes. This automatically leaves the monk in the bottom half for control. And so if that's their specialty and what they focus their key on, shouldn't they at least be in the top half? And as you go up in levels, this gets worse and worse as spells get better and better and Stunning Strike doesn't. Now I get told time and time again, I don't care what your math says. That's not the way it works at the actual table. I've played a monk, and when I attack 4 times, I tend to hit 4 times, and 4 creatures get stunned, and that's really effective. And I don't think you're lying. I really don't. These are averages. And the thing is when you are playing at a table, and you roll 10 stunning strikes, that is a really small sample size. And so you might defy the odds, but you need to understand that when you defy the odds, there's far more people that don't defy the odds. And they don't have that success with Stunning Strike. We actually have a really popular play game, and that's Critical Role. In Critical Role, we have a popular character named Bo. That is a monk. And we have super fans of this show that take every little statistic and record it. So we have Bo's key points, exactly how they've been spent and what kind of successes they've had. Bo has attempted Stunning Strike 73 times in Critical Role, and successes 25. So about 1/3. This actually is not far off the math at all. And what we have here is we have a long-running campaign where Stunning Strike has been done many times. So the law of averages has to kick in eventually. And that's when we start to see that Stunning Strike just doesn't work very often. It is not a good method of battlefield control. And Bo has spent as much ki on Stunning Strike as on anything, and had it fail 2/3 of the time. But what about the stun condition? Because one of the things I get told is the stun condition is so good, better than what a spellcaster can do, and that's why it's okay that it doesn't work as often. So Stunning Strike appears at level 5. At this point, already a spellcaster could cast Hold Person, upcast it to level 3, and hit 2 enemies with Paralyzation. It had a much better chance to succeed because it targets Wisdom, and it's hitting 2 creatures. And Paralyzation is straight out better than Stun. And the spell has a chance to last more than 1 round, potentially much more than 1 round. And here's the thing. You can go through, I've done over 100 videos, and I have talked about spells over and over and over again, and I can guarantee you I have never, ever on this channel claimed that Hold Person is a good spell. So how on earth can it be better than the best thing a monk can do? I mean, a spellcaster can hit many creatures with Hypnotic Pattern or Fear, and almost certainly get multiple fails. Now, the conditions might not be as good as Stun, but it's guaranteed to last multiple rounds, and it's way more reliable, and in both cases prevent the enemy from attacking or casting spells at all, which of course is the main point of Stunning Strike as well. I'm told Stunning Strike is so good against wizards. Fear is good against wizards. Hypnotic Pattern is good against wizards. But then I'm told I've missed something important. Spells can be counterspelled. Let's acknowledge that most of the time, nobody we are fighting has counterspell. Between the Monster Manual and Volos and Mordenkainen's Guide to Foes, we are talking about close to 800 creatures altogether. And of all of them, we have less than 20 that are considered to have counterspell as a normally prepared spell. But beyond that, the best counter to counterspell is, of course, another counterspell, which a lot of spellcasters can do. But Treant Monk, you've missed the most important and obvious thing. It's not about the tanking. It's not about the offense. It's not about the control. It's about the maneuverability. Look how amazing the monk is at maneuverability. These are the same people who tell me that they take the mobility feat for the monk. Because at level 2, a monk can move at 40. Level 6, it's 45. At level 10, it's 50. Level 14, it's 55. At level 20, it's 60. If they spend ki, they can disengage or dash as a bonus action and potentially do much more than 60 feet of movement in a single round. Got some bad news for you. At level 1, any character on a horse moves 60. And they get a free disengage or dash. They don't have to use their bonus action. Here's the sad fact. Monk's actually better on a horse too. And at level 5, a paladin can summon a horse as a 10-minute spell. And at level 5, a wizard can summon a horse as a 10-minute ritual, and it has a speed of 100. And they can hand them out to the whole party if they want to, because there's no resources spent. In just last week's video, we talked about how a paladin could move 420 feet in 1 round. And what I said at that point, and I'll repeat it now, is that, of course, that's absurdly useless. Nobody needs to move 420 feet in a round. But I also said maneuverability is good if you have something effective you can do with that maneuverability. And here's the problem. We have a monk that delivers the worst damage of any class in the game. We have a monk that doesn't have a great armor class. We have a monk that is not even in the top half of classes when it comes to being able to control the battlefield. And now we give that monk a bunch of maneuverability. What are they supposed to do with it? It doesn't matter that the monk's unique mobility can be duplicated or exceeded. That spells or magic items can also duplicate or improve upon monk mobility quite easily, whether it's Long Strider or Misty Step, or magic items like the Ebony Fly, or any of the other figurines of wondrous power, or Zephyr Strike, which can be combined with Long Strider, by the way, by the lowly Ranger, which can give them straight out superior maneuverability than a monk at level 2. Barbarians improve their speed, Rangers can avoid difficult terrain, so can Druids, Conjurers can teleport without casting spells, so can Echo Knights, and it goes on and on and on. A Glory Paladin can actually make the entire party more maneuverable. Not saying Monk's maneuverability isn't good, but it's in no way unique, nor are they the best at it. And maneuverability on its own has no value at all. Maneuverability is good, but it is only good if it can be combined with something else that is effective and benefits from this maneuverability. And monks just don't have that. But Treant Monk, I read the monk class, and there's so many abilities you haven't accounted for here. You just work your way down the list, and there's so many cool monk features that they get moving up to level 20. Doesn't that make them worthwhile? Well, the first thing that so many people miss, if a non-spellcasting class gets a feature that can be duplicated by a spell, then that feature is no better than getting that spell. So if you take a spellcaster that can duplicate those features and has no class features of their own, they're at least equivalent. But let's go through them one at a time. First, Deflect Missile. I talked about this a little bit before. But I didn't mention, of course, that it's important to keep in mind the monk is easier to hit. So to some degree, this is just leveling the playing field when we're talking about ranged attacks. Secondly, as I did mention, this uses a reaction to provide a defense against a single attack. Do you know how common that ability is? Except in almost all other cases, it's not limited to ranged attacks. Then we have Slow Fall. Now the thing that's wrong with this ability is it almost never comes up. Not to say you're never going to take falling damage, but in most sessions this isn't going to come up even once. And once again, I gotta mention, this is duplicated by a spell. That spell is a level 1 spell, Featherfall, and Featherfall is going to protect not just you from falling damage, but the entire party. Then we get Evasion. Again, this doesn't come up often, but probably more than Slowfall. This is going to reduce the damage you take from dexterity-based area of effect damage. Again, this is not unique. A Barbarian, for example, can get advantage on that save at level 2, and that's not even considered their best level 2 ability. They also have a lot more hit points to take that damage. We're reminded here that the Monk has less hit points than other martial classes, except perhaps the Rogue, who, by the way, gets the exact same ability. Then we have Stillness of Mind. Now, Charmed and Frightened can both happen a lot, so if this was immunity, or even advantage on saving throws, or something like that, it could be really good. But as it is, it's problematic, as it requires your action to use, which means you already lose a round. Secondly, not all Charmed or Frightened effects, in fact, a lot of them, don't allow you to use your action how you want. So if you can't use your action the way you want, you can't even use this ability. So Stillness of Mind doesn't help you at all if you're hit with several Charmed or Frightened effects, like Hypnotic Pattern or Fear, for example. Then we get Purity of Body. Immune to disease is so-so, but immunity to poison is good. Again, though, we are reminded that a monk had less hit points to begin with, but immunity to the poison condition is good. But 10th level is pretty late, though. Although the poison condition happens, it's not in the average session. Then we get Tongue of the Sun and Moon. This is utility that comes way later than other classes could do the same thing with spells or class abilities. Then we get Timeless Body. This is a basically useless ability at level 15. Spellcasters at this level just got 7th level spells. You got Oil of Olay. Then at 18th level, we're going to get Empty Body. Now, Empty Body does two different things. The first thing it does is it gives you a super circumstantial spell that you can cast for 8 key points, and you're probably never going to use that ability. The second ability that you're more likely to use is going to give you what is essentially improved invisibility, plus resistance to a lot of kinds of damage, which sounds really good on the surface, but I think we need to look at that a little closer. Number one, improved invisibility is no big deal at 18th level. We have a number of classes that had access to that at level 7. You're getting it at level 18. These same classes now can cast Foresight. This is an ability that is going to give you everything improved invisibility gives you and much, much more. The second is the resistance to damage. Again, this is nothing unique. We're seeing all kinds of paladins getting resistance to all kinds of damage as we get into these high levels. We're also seeing clerics get it, and a lot of them get it 24 hours a day. For you, it is going to last for 1 minute. And in addition to 1 minute, it is going to cost you your action to do it, which means in most combats, you would have to do this on the first turn of combat, which means no stunning strikes, no martial arts attacks, no flurry of blows. You basically give up your first turn of combat to set this up for 1 minute at level 18. And the final thing, the final just total insult is, of course, it's going to cost you 4 key points to do this. And then finally, we get Perfect Self. This is the perfect capstone to encapsulate the perfect suckiness of this class, in that this is potentially the worst capstone in the game. If you roll initiative and you have no key points remaining, you regain 4 key points. This is 20% of your total key point total, and you only get it if you've run out of key points, which means that it only comes into effect if you spend all your resources. If you play intelligently and reserve your resources, then your capstone doesn't come into play at all. This is just the poetic end to the monk. So here's my final thoughts. I've used some strong language in this video, but I do want to say I don't want to promise anything, because you could make a monk for your next campaign and you could be very effective. When I talk about averages here, I'm talking about averages, and our gameplay is such a tiny sample size that luck is going to play a significant factor, even for what seems like a long campaign. But think of it like playing roulette. Yes, you could walk away a winner. It's just not what you should expect to happen. And the chance of beating the house is there, but for every winner, there is more losers. For every monk player that finds themselves effective in gameplay, there's more that leave the class disappointed. A monk player needs to be luckier than the player beside them just to be as effective, and less unlucky to be less effective. One way or the other, with a monk, the odds are not in your favor. And that is why I hold to my opinion that monks are the worst class in the game. They are worse than the ranger. And I keep getting asked for build videos for monks. What would you do to take care of the monk? Here's a really sad fact. You want to make a good monk that's effective with damage? Take Warlock 2, Monk 18. Focus on your charisma. Take Agonizing Blast and cast Hex. You will do way more damage with your Eldritch Blast than you will do with the 18 levels worth of monk abilities. So there you go. There's your monk build that can meet the baseline. Now I'm going to be asked what I think could be done to fix the monk. And it comes down to this. Number 1, a monk should be able to do more attacks than the fighter. I did a variant where I had the monk able to deliver as many attacks as the fighter using flurry of blows, and some of the comments were, how dare you? Monks shouldn't be able to do as many attacks as a fighter. The ability is called Flurry of Blows, and historically monks could do more attacks than the fighter. So I think that's one way that we could deal with things. Number 2, they should either have a D10 for hit points or have a better armor class somehow. And number 3, you got to deal with the problem with ki. And the problem with ki is that everything feeds off the same resource, and that resource is too small. So it runs out very quickly. So, if you gave the monks better armor class and better damage, and you gave them more ki, I think that's a good start. But I'll tell you, my variant, I did it, and then we play tested it, and you know what? It was still the weakest class. And so I've been revising it, but I gotta tell you that it is tough, because the monk is so far off where all the other classes are, it's hard to figure out where that balance lies. So I've had my rant, and now I'm going to sit back, relax, and I'm going to have some fun, because I'm not playing monks. D&D is for everyone. Thanks, everyone, and I'll talk to you next week.